quick, I think, if I'm not mistaken, the last time you were in Athens, wasn't a game of table tennis involved?
There was.
Johnson,
there was big fundraisers, coaches and cancer.
Yeah.
The backdrop to the story, I was not given the full information of what really was going on. I was told by a friend of mine that there was this competition just to play Brad Johnson in ping pong. So I showed up in sweatpants and a shirt at his house, picked him up. He had, it was sneakers and a suit. And about 30 minutes on the way here, I said, look, I got to ask. I mean, I get the suit, but why the sneakers? And he told me about that's what this cause was. I said, you could have let me in on it and let me know. So I quickly, they got one of the basketball coaches that was kind of my size. I gave me a suit, worked out. I already had the sneakers on, and hence I competed in what ended up being, 1,500 people or however many people there playing ping pong in the middle of Stegman Fieldhouse, right? That's where it was. Yeah. So yeah, it's crazy.
How well do you know Mark Fox, the basketball coach? Don't you know him a little bit?
I've gotten to know him through that same buddy of mine, Mike Nixon, and you know, for everything that he's trying to do here as well, pulling for him because of basketball is my first love, and if I could, I'd be a 48-year-old freshman today because I still have my eligibility, but I think that would be a little across the lines of taking up a spot.
You had a chance to watch Georgia on TV?
I did. I watched them against Florida,
and
a game that they were able to win here. And I've seen that, you know, highlights of enough games where they've had some leads and couldn't quite finish the deal. The one in LSU probably hurts the most. But every chance I can to watch some form of basketball, I'm trying to get my.
What did you think? I know it was just one game that you saw there, but just.
Well, I liked the way they operate on offense, and certainly the guard play was pretty good that game, and they created some turnovers and were able to, you know, confuse the Gators, who had a stronghold on them for quite some time. I think that was the Gators' first conference loss in 2 years, if I'm not mistaken.
They won like 24 straight, I believe.
Yeah. So, and my wife is also a Gator, so we're watching it together. You know, for his style and the type of athlete that's starting to come here and turning the program around is something obviously everyone wants to do. And it's in a tough conference when you're dealing with the Kentuckys and Floridas and the likes. I mean, it's always a great challenge, and I pull for him.
Keeping the Georgia thing going a little bit, of course, the young man for the Braves right now, Alex Wood. I know you saw him a little bit here when he was for Georgia. Obviously, you've seen him a lot for the Braves. Just what he's progressed and what you see from him right now, what he's bringing to that.
Well, he's living proof you can't put everybody in the same box. You know, you can't just make everybody pitch the same, and you can't certainly predict anything that's going to happen based on the way that guy's mechanics are and his makeup. I love his makeup, and I think his desire to go out there and compete is second to none. And I think he's just getting himself in a position where now he's not only thought of as an add-on; he's one of the mainstays, and I think they expect. Now he's reached the point of expectations, and I think he's ready for it.
What was that when your career, you're reaching at that part of your career? What was the most difficult part to fulfill those expectations?
For me, it's expectations of people so high that I don't think it was easily even attainable. My expectations were high enough, but I think when people unfairly put certain numbers on you based on the way that you throw or the stuff you have, they seem to think it's a little easier than it is. So I was supposed to win the Cy Young a lot, and so therefore it seems like a failure. But to me, it was more than that. It was the ability to do things that will help your team win a championship. So when Glavine and Maddox are not perceived as having great stuff, but they exceed those opportunities, that's a luxury. But when you're given great stuff or you possess great stuff, then all of a sudden you're supposed to even be better. So that was the toughest thing for me. Having the best stuff on the rotation, not winning 20 every year, people were looking at me like, how can you not win 20?
Actually, one more thing, I'll let you jump in. I'm not hogging it, but just when Major League Baseball draft, of course, first and second round, third round, I mean, you're talking about no-brainers, kids are going to go because that's big time money. But for a player who's kind of borderline, whether or not he's going to be successful, or compared to coming to college, what advice would you give that
well,
person?
30 years ago, I'd say if you had a chance, you go out right out of high school. But the college program's gotten so much better that now you have benefits for not only getting an education, but increasing your odds and draftability to go to college programs and then being more prepared to not have to spend 4 or 5 years in a minor. So it's kind of a half one dozen the other. I mean, if you're emotionally, physically ready to make that jump from high school and you want to get into the system, then that's one thing. But if you're a fringe player or you have an opportunity to get better through college, now you can do that. 30 years ago, probably only less than a handful of colleges could you go to where the programs would develop you at a rate where you just magnified your opportunities. So I think that's the value of the college programs today versus back in my day. It was not quite the same, and I was fortunate to go the way I did.
Have you gotten to see any of the Georgia players since you've been in town? Have you gotten to see any of the players play, or have gotten to thrown around at all with them? I
haven't. My schedule has been so crazy. If that navigational system doesn't work, I'm not here right now. I am at the seat of my pants right now with where I go and how I go about it. You know, with the kids at home, and I'm in New York more than you could imagine. So taking in the normal activities of life that I would like to do just aren't possible at this point. And once I get through this year, I'm sure it will slow down a little bit. But the induction to the Hall of Fame has certainly sped things up.
Yes, sort of a broad question, but both on the field and off. What's some advice that you would give to some of these like 18 and 19-year-old kids who one day, you know, want to be in your shoes?
Well, there's a lot of advice, but the biggest thing is they've got such a pull against them in distractions and technology and so many things that can grab their attention and take them away from their goals, that you're seeing a lot of college kids take longer and longer times to not only graduate, but figure out what they want to do in life. Right. There are so many things that will deter them from taking a risk. I don't think enough kids take a risk and are afraid to fail, even in the quest of their dream or passion. And that to me is, I call it the catch-up theory in our sport, Heinz 52. Heinz 52 is, everybody else is doing that, and there may not be with integrity. I've got to do it to survive. And I think that would be the biggest advice. You don't have to do that. Even though in the moment it seems like, and you can imagine in my sports, the success people were getting, there are things those people will never get back.
Right.
And there's a temporary financial gain in that, but I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned in how you can go about your pursuit and your quest for what you want to do in life.
What was your mindset, you know, if you ever had like a down game, or, you know, Georgia had 26 games last year, what was your mindset? What would you tell yourself whenever you needed to like bounce back from something?
I'm kind of a rally guy, like dig a hole and try to find your way out rather than, you know, come up with excuses or justify why things don't go right. So when in the early part of my career, when things didn't go well, I didn't handle it well. I just went into a cocoon. And when things went well, I was available and showed myself in the public. I realized that's not the proper way to go about it. That in life, there's going to be challenges you meet, and it's how you view those and how your attitude towards them that's going to determine whether how quick you get up off the seat of your pants or make the necessary adjustments to survive. And, you know, in our sport, in baseball, I've said this a million times, it's one thing to make it into the big leagues. That's hard, but it's harder to stay. So every day is a journey of how do I stay? How do I get better? How do I deal with the elements? So, you know, success can be skewed at times, but at the same time, you know, everyone who's playing a team sport, the idea is to win as many games and win a championship. I mean, but I think sometimes we go a little too far in evaluating what a successful season or campaign is. And college has the greatest pressure in the world, whether it's football. Baseball's not under it as much. Football, you know, it is what it is. And the pressures that drive the universities or the coaches or the players to win are so consuming that sometimes you see the pitfalls of that when they're faced with decisions they wish they could have back.
Back to advising some of these college-age kids, you had or elbow injuries have become a really big thing in just the sport of baseball, and you had issues later on in your career, but earlier you were relatively healthy. What would you advise these kids at this age to maybe preemptively avoid those kind of injuries? And
well, you know, sometimes the damage is done early on, so no one knows the background of them, the kids that get to college, how much they've been burned out or how much they played just to get the opportunity to play in college. But I think the biggest dilemma is to know the difference between hurt or sore and hurt. And that's a big challenge because hurt, sometimes that won't do you any good to help your team. Sore, something you have to work through and decipher and know your body and you could pitch through or play through. And there's a big cross-section of overtraining and over-specialized that's going on in our sport today. So, put simply, is we're bigger, we're faster, we're stronger, and we have more wisdom, but we have more injuries than we ever had before. Something's wrong. So we have to go sometimes, I have a big belief, go backwards to find out success instead of always going forwards. Because some guys were pretty successful before me, and I'd love to know what they did and what worked for them versus technology's telling me this is what I can do to do this or that. So there's a fine balance in everything. And for collegiate sports, it's no different than anything else. Competing for playing time, competing for championships, and then, you know, aspiring to go on to the next level. Baseball's a unique sport that has 20-some players on it that all are trying to do a common goal that team aspect will work, but individually want to go to the next level. That's a very interesting dynamic when you're part of a minor league team, but you know individually you'd like to go to the next level.
Now you mentioned your recent Hall of Fame induction. Are you finding it easier to get a tee time in Atlanta that you could introduce yourself as Hall of Famer John Smoltz as opposed to just John Smoltz?
You know, I've yet to do that. Probably never will, but I'm sure it does have its perks if I decided one day to go down that road. You know, you mentioned that. I've never in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, seen people look and have such admiration and really genuine happiness for me. The people close to me know what I've gone through and what I've dealt with. But I think the admiration of my career went like 100 times greater by that announcement than if it would have been like, hey, you had a great career, really admire. Then all of a sudden, bam, you know, it's like, wow, the Hall of Fame. It just instantaneously changes your resume, but it doesn't change me.
Well, just finally, who called you first, Greg Maddux or Tom Glavine, to congratulate you once you heard the news?
They knew the process. They were smart. They knew my phone had blown up with 700 texts.
Is that right?
It took me 3 days to return all of them. But they both, I think Glavine reached out, and then Maddux was on the golf course actually when I got the call, so he reached out when he found out the information.